على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Okay, so we will begin today Surah Baqarah. This surah, pretty much so all of the ulama since the time of the Sahaba have agreed that this surah is Madaniyah, which means that it has been revealed in the Madinatul Munawwara. Now, when we say that, we don't always imply that it's the actual place. So some ulama actually say that yes, it implies all of those things that were revealed in Medina. And others will say that no, it implies anything that was revealed during that period of time after Hijrah. So regardless if the ayah was revealed or the surah was revealed in the actual Makan, meaning in Al-Madinatul Munawwara, or somewhere else outside of it, as long as it took place after Hijrah, then it's called Madani. Because it's not really the place, rather it's that period of time. Because there is a distinct difference in both the Prophet's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the message even of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in regards to Mecca and Medina. And even the differences of the two places are very distinct to this day. So anyone who's gone for Hajj or Umrah will know that there's a definite different feel between the two cities. Mecca has a particular feel to it. Even the inhabitants and the people who live in Mecca, they're considered to be a certain way, have certain habits, and the same goes for Medina. So when we say Madaniyah, the ulama say that the majority of this surah was revealed in Medina. We're going to use it in terms of an actual period of time in the life of the Prophet ﷺ and his mission. So meaning what? After?
Hijrah.
There you go, after Hijrah. Because one ayah was revealed during Hajjatul Wada, in the farewell Hajj, when he, at that time. But we're still going to consider it part of Madaniyah, part of the Medinan period, if you will, because again, we're talking about a period of time that is marked by the Hijrah. Now, that's important because, again, just like the life of the Prophet and his message changed slightly. Change doesn't mean that the essence of it, the core of it, of course, is always the same. But there was a slight change in the delivery, and also a key important component of that change is that detailed commandments and law were not revealed until after Hijrah. Okay, so the Meccan period is entirely comprised of the da'wah, or Allah, or the messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, inviting people towards Allah and towards akhlaq, which are basic codes of human behavior, or you can even say beyond that, these are the internal aspects of a person's character which have to be refined. That was the primary message and the effort of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca. And even the Quran, any surahs or anything, and all the chapters and ayat that were revealed at that period of time carry the same type of message, meaning they only comprise of the oneness of Allah, Tawheed, the reality of prophethood or nubuwwah, and also the reality of the hereafter, and the components of human psychology, if you will. I don't like using that word, that's just human character. The softness of the heart, and being charitable, and considerate to others, so forth and so on, which is all part of that good character. That's all that the ayats, the verses, and the chapters that were revealed in that period of time comprise of only those subjects. And so that also comprises a big part of the main purpose or mission of the Prophet ﷺ, as the Quran itself explains to us what it is. هو الذي بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. So here, this is one ayah out of many that describe the three main components of the Prophet's mission, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what are they? First one is that he recites the ayat of Allah to his people. So ayat, ayat, what are they really? They're not verses. What is the real meaning of ayah? Sign, nishan, right? Sign. Also proof. It also means what? A proof. So what is the meaning then to recite the ayat of Allah? It means obviously that he recited the Quran, but what was the purpose of reciting the Quran to his people? It was to call them towards the worship of Allah, to the oneness of Allah. It was da'wah in Allah. You understand? He was calling them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's oneness and calling them to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in regards to that, the ayat, the Quran itself, is the proof. Right? Because for the Arab, the biggest miracle of the Nubuwwah, or the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was in fact what? The Quran. Okay? And that's why in this ayah, يَتْنُوا عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. So reciting the verses of Allah upon them, meaning calling them towards Allah through the means of the Quran. That was the main, right, purpose is here first, that he called his people towards Allah through the Quran, because the Quran itself was for them the mu'jiza, or the miracle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Although obviously there are many others, but that is the key right there. The second part was yuzakkihim. The word yuzakki comes from tazkiyah. This is probably a word you may have heard in passing at some point in time. Has anyone here not heard that word used? And you can be frank. Tazkiyah? Okay. Tazkiyah is a branch of the sciences or ulum of deen, and it is primarily concerned with what I mentioned before, the akhlaq, or the manners and morals of a human, even more, if you want to go further than that, the internal qualities of human beings. So tazkiyah to nafs literally means to, sometimes they translate it as reformation of the soul, but if we look at the root of tazkiyah, and in this ayah, the tazkiyah is the root word of yuzakkihim, okay? So tazkiyah, it literally means to remove the excess. It's also related to another word we all know, zakat. Zakat is to do what? It is you tally up how much money you have, and not even money, really in reality it's not money, it's how much what? Wealth. Excess wealth, meaning wealth that you do not use. That's why furniture and cars and homes and things like that are not included. Because technically, even if you have an excess, it doesn't matter, you're still using it. So you basically make a, right, you have to have a year, you have to have a schedule, and everyone has to appoint a time, which doesn't have to be in Ramadan either. A lot of people like to do that, which is a good thing, because to give zakat in Ramadan, it adds more reward. Anything you do in Ramadan, any faridah you do in Ramadan, you get how much more reward? 70 times. So of course, it's a smart thing, it's not a bad thing, but it's not necessary. You just have to pick one period of time. Every year at this time, I'm going to take an account of all the wealth I have that's in excess and above and beyond my needs. And the excess now, what do? You give zakat. So the idea of zakat is basically above and beyond what is necessary, an excess. So if you take that concept, tazkiyah means to remove the excess. If you take that further and you relate it to, let's say, something physical, like I'm overweight. So tazkiyah would mean what? Get rid of the excess weight until you're at an ideal, right? Or you could say an ideal weight, I guess, whatever. Until you get the maximum out of your health and you're at the ideal weight, you have to remove the excess. So if you relate that to the spiritual side of things, what would tazkiyat and nafs mean? Yeah, take out the excess. Bad here means what? An excess. And it's interesting even that you use the word bad, because aslan, in reality, as Muslims, we don't believe in things like the doctrine of the original sin. Okay? Even without Christianity, traditionally the Western world has always had a very negative view. If you look at Greek plays and Greek philosophy, the traditional view of mankind is very negative, right? That people are not to be relied upon, that they are not in essence moral beings, but they are in essence immoral beings. That's one worldview. The Islamic worldview doesn't hold that. So we often quote an ayah of Surah Al-Teen to prove that point, which all of you know. What ayah is that, if anyone wants to?
لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم.
There you go. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. That we have created mankind in the best of forms. So the Islamic worldview is that actually human beings are created in essence as moral beings. You get the difference? Human beings are not created in original sin. They're not created as immoral beings, but rather we say that they are created as Allah Himself, the Creator, said, "Fi ahsani taqweem," in the best of all forms. So taqweem, does it just mean the physical form? Because if we're going to break down the essence of man, is man just physical? If you refer to yourself, this is me, are you just talking about your flesh and bones? You're talking about everything that's included that is not physical. All of your experiences, your emotions, and all of your characteristics. All of that is included when I say what? Me or I, or anything that refers to you even as an individual. So man cannot be just, we can't take the ayat to mean that taqweem, the way that man was created, only refers to the physical aspect of man, but it refers to what? Every aspect of man. So if that's the case, then what do you think then does this ayah establish? That human beings, in essence, are they good or bad?
Good.
All right. So looking at it from that perspective, we're not going to say anything's bad. We're going to say there's an excess of that particular character or characteristic of that person. So to give an example, I'll try and explain it simply. You can have a characteristic of, for instance, let's say you can have, a person can be angry. Very simple. Anger is a component of almost every human being, is it not? If you don't get angry ever, can you truly be called human? There's any human being who never gets upset? No. There's anger in all of us. It exists. Okay, go back to what we just said. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we are in the best of forms, fi ahsani taqweem. This is what He has given us. This is part of the components of being human. So is anger in and of itself bad? Yeah, the answer would be no. It's only bad when there's an excess of anger. So therefore the Prophet ﷺ, in many hadith, but he simply told one of the companions when he was asked for advice to do one thing, don't get upset. So what does it mean? You should never be upset? There's no such thing as no. It means don't allow your anger to do what? To control you. There's a big difference. Not that anger shouldn't be there, because there's another excess. So maybe even excess it gives you an idea of ziyada, right? That you have like some kind of chart. And there's an excess, and there's a decline, and so forth and so on, right? But in terms of tazkiyat an-nafs and excess, we mean by it that it could be more than what's necessary, and we also mean by it not enough. So let's say you have a person that never gets angry, or very rarely, and if they do, they're so weak they don't do anything about it. Would you say that's a good thing? Their anger is not strong enough in them that it allows them to, for instance, defend themselves. Or in worst case scenario, one thing is you don't defend yourself, but you don't defend others. Let's say you become so weak in this regard that even if someone attacks, Allah forbid, your family or something like that, right? You become so weak that you do not even have the will to defend that which is your responsibility to defend. No one in their right mind would say that's a good thing. Correct? So what does that all tell you? Anger is a component of human beings. Human beings are created fi ahsani taqweem. We are in essence good. The only problem is what? Is when you don't do tazkiyah. You don't have equilibrium. So the Prophet ﷺ taught two things primarily here. What is it? First, he taught people about Allah, about the hereafter, right? And about nubuwah, meaning what is the reality of this nubuwah, of prophethood, of wahi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends this message to particular people in order to warn other people. Okay, now that's one thing. The second part is what? Tazkiyah. So now do you understand tazkiyah? Tazkiyah is, again, to create this equilibrium within human beings because the problem is in not humans themselves, because we are, again, created in the best way possible. So every component of our character is part of what we are and what we should be. However, you have to do what? Tazkiyah. You have to create an equilibrium. Balance. I like equilibrium as compared to balance, because balance means what? Everything's the same. And that's not always what's necessary. That's not always what's you can't. So forgive me for using this example, because this may be controversial for some. The more pious of us might find an objection to it, but I have to use it. Music. Certain types of music, if you have treble and bass and all, right? Certain types of music you need more treble than bass, and other types of music you need more bass than treble. Why? Because it depends on the song and the music style. You can't all have it balanced, because it won't sound right. So in order for it to sound right, what do you have to do? You have to tweak everything a little bit, so all the notes, and depends on the style, so forth and so on. Now I know that may offend, again, you can say some of the more pious amongst us, but that's how it works. The same thing goes with human character. We've all been created in the best mode, fi ahsani taqweem, physically and also spiritually. So some ulama take it so far to say that even if a person is deformed, right, if they have, let's say, like, elephantitis or whatever, right, all these, they have, right, the deformity of the highest degree. Even then, if that person, just on a very basic fiqh level, if they were to say, Wallahi, by Allah, I'm prettier than the moon. Because if you make a false oath, you're technically responsible now. They said that person is not made a false oath. Why? Because Allah said He created humans in general in what? The best of all forms. So even if they're deformed and whatever they may be, they are still considered to be what? The best form possible. And that means internally also. So every human being, obviously, we're all different as individuals. So that means, just like the music style demands a certain amount of tweaking, every individual demands a certain amount of what? Tweaking. And it's not all going to be the same for everyone. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he trained the people around him, when he did this, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, when he did tazkiyah, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he used to pray in the nighttime, and he used to be very quiet and very mindful of the people in his house, not to wake them up and disturb them. Because his characteristic, as they said, was what? Rifq and riqqa. He was a very soft-hearted and a very kind man. Umar radiallahu anhu, on the other hand, it said that when he used to pray at night, he used to be loud. He used to recite his Quran loudly so that everyone else in the house could wake up. He wanted to get them up also, make sure they're praying. So the Prophet ﷺ found out about both, which is also interesting, because we're not in the habit of showing people our good deeds. Some of the shuyukh have said that you should hide your good deeds just like you hide your sins. Right? Whatever good you do, you should be just as secretive about them as you would about your bad. So they weren't in the habit of telling people, but it came to the Prophet's knowledge, and this is what they did. So he told both of them. He told Abu Bakr anhu that raise your voice a little bit. And he told Umar anhu to lower your voice a little bit. What is he doing? According to the individual, he is giving them what they need to create that equilibrium. For Abu Bakr, what was it? You're a very soft-hearted man. You're a very kind man. You're a very considerate person. But there's a time when you need to have a little edge to you. So raise your voice a little bit. And for Umar anhu, you're a very strong man, a very powerful man. And that's why you need to do what? Lower your voice a little bit. That was basically, in essence, what tazkiyah was with the Prophet ﷺ. You take each person and you understand who they are and you deliver the medicine accordingly. Everything in the physical is also, many times, it correlates to the spiritual. So just like a doctor would be a fool if they don't take into consideration a person's history and so many other things before they diagnose them and give them medicine, same thing goes with the spiritual. Every single person is different. And what they are, if you understand what I've been saying so far too, what they are is fine. There's nothing bad about that person. What's bad is that there is an excess somewhere. And that's what has to be dealt with. That excess has to just be basically taken out, tazkiyah, and then whatever that person is, be they a little soft, a little strong, that's fine. That's them, and they're okay. They just need to be worked with to the extent that they have that equilibrium. And there afterwards, whatever each person possesses of qualities is now used for good. Make sense? So we're not talking about making this monotone society here, okay, where everyone is exactly the same, because this is also what has happened in the modern era, let's say 20th and 21st century Muslims, right? A lot of things have happened to us. And, you know, I talked to, Abdulaziz Surah Baqarah Ayat in MCCGP recently, and he made a good statement. I agree with him wholeheartedly, that in the modern era of mankind, if anyone thinks that they have not in some way been damaged, it's a lie. That we have been taken so far away from our fitrah in this day and age that all of us, to a certain degree or the other, has been damaged. We've been taken, you understand, the fitrah is the original innate nature of mankind, which now you have to basically just go out into the woods and camp or do something or go for a walk to even get in tune with it. If we are so busy in our lives that we don't do that, we often don't even understand what that fitrah is, that innate nature deep and down inside of us, okay? So, but all human beings, wherever they are in this day and age, because modernism in terms of its effect has affected what? The whole world. Is there anyone that we know of, besides very obscure people here and there, right, that has not been affected in some way or the other by modernism? And in so many small ways, too, things have happened to us. Just even having an automobile, just to give an example how socially it's affected us. That in the old days, let's say a teenager had a problem with their parents. There's no cars, no highways, right? And it's definitely not internet or anything. And they got mad. And they want to run away. Where are they going to run to? You're living in a village or a town or even in the city, in the neighborhoods too in the cities in those days. That means your uncle, your aunt, and everyone else is in the neighborhood. You don't have a car, you can't drive anywhere. You don't have any friends to just call up and tell them, hey, pick me up. You understand? Like, so what are they going to do?
Stay and work it out.
They're going to stay and work it out because they have no choice. But then comes the modern era, both in physical means, like an automobile and a telephone, and also in social ways, because with all of these things, also many ideas changed. Ideas about life, about religion, about everything changed. So now, if the son or the daughter gets upset at their parents, what do? They just get in the car and drive away. You understand my point? So no doubt the modern era has affected mankind in ways that we just from very small things like that to very big things, we're all a victim of it to some degree. So we're more that we get enroached in that life, the more our fitrah becomes more and more obscure. And we don't even understand that innate part of human beings. Why is that also important? Because look, remember I said last time we met that in Surah Baqarah we have now detailed commandments that are spelled out and given to us. But it happens in a time and a place where it's all organic. This is a community. Unlike ours, it's very hard for us, even in so-called traditional communities in the modern era, it's very hard for us to put ourselves in the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba when they were living in that place in that time. It's a very small place, and Madinatul Munawwara would be considered a village in our standards, right? Everyone knows each other. It's a community. It's people living with each other. It's a society, and everything's organic. They're very much more closer to the fitrah than we are. So to understand it in our perspective and say there's a constitution, you understand how people do it, right? They wrote this constitution and they had these laws. It wasn't quite like that. Yes, there were laws revealed from the divine, but in the context of a very organic and a very dynamic and also a very vibrant community, but a community closer to fitrah than what we today call the modern life that we live. Does it make sense? And that's important. It's very important to understand. So things happen to the Prophet ﷺ as an individual or other people in the community, even in regards to very private affairs, like divorce and marriage and everything else. And then as those things occur, ayat are revealed that guide those people in the community as to what to do when these things happen. All Right? So you have to understand the context. If you don't understand what's called asbabul nuzul, how and why these things happen, then how will we ever be able to apply it to ourselves? This is also important to remember too, because unfortunately, there's another lesson in this, is that these laws that pertain especially to our social affairs, marriage, divorce, so forth and so on, right, really have no application unless you have a society in which those laws can be practiced. You get my point? I'm not saying that they're not worth studying or knowing. We have to know it because it's a part of our deen. But literally, a lot of these things will become, they will not be applicable because we just simply don't have the society where we can live accordingly. And I'll give you a practical example that happened to me not too long ago. Someone called me and wanted me to basically talk to this couple. Their daughter wanted to marry a non-Muslim. So they come to the masjid and I'm talking to the couple. In the beginning, I'm just trying to explain to them some basic things to hopefully explain why I'm not willing to do it. But the girl was adamant that I came here expecting that the imam was going to do it and this is what I want. So I just had to kindly tell her at the end of all of it, well, you have to find another imam because I'm not going to do that. You're going to have to find maybe another imam out there will do it, but not me. So sorry, right? And so what am I trying to say? What can really be done about that situation? Nothing. Neither I nor even the parents have any authority whatsoever to even complain. Could you imagine if they went to the courthouse and got married and the parents came behind and said, we don't approve? What does it mean, even legally? Absolutely nothing. Right? So there's no application, you understand? There's no way that we can actually do anything in regards to these laws. So how are they applicable and how are they practical for us? And the answer is only on a very personal level. Only on a very personal level. There's really nothing much above and beyond that you can do about it. You got it? Only on a very personal level can you apply these things, which is interesting because people are so worried about the creeping Sharia, right? They said, what can we do? And even according to Sharia, interestingly enough, in a country like this, which its laws are very clearly secular and it's established that way and it runs that way, we don't even have from the Sharia itself the legal authority to establish those things in this country. Now, if they give it to you, that's another issue. They decide, which I doubt would happen, that, you can have a Sharia court, for instance. That's a different issue. But I don't think that would happen, and even Muslims have to understand it in this particular context, that is not even our right, technically, from Sharia itself. It's not our right. We don't live in a land that acknowledges the Sharia, and we don't live in a land which would give us even the right to use it in their legal system, you understand? And it's not our right from Sharia in itself to do that. So it only becomes applicable at a very personal level. So when you read these ayat and you talk about these issues of divorce, of marriage, then how is it applicable? Again, only on a very personal level. It doesn't go beyond that, and you can't take it any further than that. So I'm trying to apply something else, which is that in essence, we are at the first stage still. The first stage of what? The first stage of revelation and the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, which is the Meccan stage. Not the Madani. The Madani is when you have an autonomous society that is allowed to practice these things on their own, okay? And they're willingly want to practice. That's another big part of the picture. So in Surah Baqarah, in an ayah that probably all of you know, right after Ayatul Kursi, because there's some hadith where the Prophet ﷺ had used different words for the Surah Baqarah, salam, which means literally a hump of a camel. But what is the point here? Meaning it is the peak of the Quran is Surah Baqarah. And out of Surah Baqarah, out of all the ayat, the Sayyidatu ayat al-Quran, or the afdal ayah, the best of all these ayat in the Quran is what? Ayatul Kursi, right? So right after that ayah, we hear a proclamation from Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, which is made in Medina. Meaning again, here's a society, they have the law structure, they're practicing it. What is that statement? La ikraha fit deen. There is no compulsion in regards to deen. So a person or a people, even a society, have to practice deen on the basis of their own will and volition. So until a people themselves decide that this is what we want to do, even then, you can't just come with law. What am I basing that on? The entire Meccan period, what was it about? It was preparing people's minds and hearts so that they can live in a society that can be structured according to the Sharia. You don't put the cart before the horse. Okay? So the effort of the community now, should it be Medini or Mekki? Mekki. It's all about educating people and preparing them. So from their own willingness, so that young girl, right, who technically can do what she wants anyhow. You probably already married the guy, for as long as I know. There's nothing you can do about that, right? So that young girl, she has to get to the point where she sees the value in obeying Allah on her own, that it makes sense to her. Okay? That's the bottom line. The only way to do that now is we have to do what the Prophet did in a period of time that is called the Mekki or Meccan period. So I'm not saying we shouldn't study the law of the Quran, you have to. But if you study the law of the Quran nowadays, it's more for personal practice, and the second purpose, of course, is to understand it so that you can defend yourself and the deen from the attacks of people who oftentimes misquote or misunderstand what the law is, what the Sharia is. The two purposes only. One is for your own personal practice, and the other is what? To be able to understand well enough these things that you can defend the attacks of people, malignant attacks of people upon the Sharia and the deen of Islam. But beyond that, no. In practice, really, in terms of like having an actual community and a group that has a form of law that's visible, we're not at that stage. I would dare to even say, forget here in the United States of America, I would dare to even say in many Muslim countries too, we're not at that stage. We are still at a Meccan or a Mekki stage where people have to be educated and on their own volition, they have to be ready and willing to imbibe the rules and laws and commandments of the Quran. So the first stage is absolutely imperative. And that is the first two things we just spoke about. Da'wah through the ayat of Allah, tazkiyah, reforming ourselves to become what? Well-rounded human beings. And then the third part, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. The third part after all that is to teach the detailed commandments of Allah. Alright? The hikmah, the hukm, the detailed commandments, the do's and the don'ts, the halal and the haram. So that comes in terms of sequence here, what? Last. Right? That comes last. Meaning these two things precede this. Not that it's any less important, but there's a human psychology here. This is what the whole thing is about. In Mecca, which is actually in terms of time, where was the majority of the Prophet's and the mission? Was there more time in Mecca or in Medina?
Mecca. In
Mecca. So I mean, do the math yourself. Again, the conclusion would be that the majority of the efforts of the Prophet were to prepare people for what happened in Medina. Without that preparation, you can't get this. It's, like I said, it's putting the cart before the horse. Right? So our efforts should be focused there at this point in time. Surah Baqarah basically, it's also reminds us of that. So you notice it's very, if you take a look at the surah and read it on your own, and also other surahs that have detailed commandments in regards to So many Surah An-Nisa, right? Which also includes the laws of inheritance and so forth and so on. But always you will find that Allah Ta'ala brings us back to the original subject, which is what? The oneness of Allah. The promise of a life hereafter. So in the beginning of Surah Baqarah, you have same subject. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالله ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. And then in the end of the surah, what do you have? لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم. And in the middle of it, Ayatul Kursi, الله لا إله إلا, which is all Tawheed. It's all about the main message of Islam, which was the whole focus of the Meccan period. So what I'm trying to say is, even with all of these laws, talaq, divorce, marriage, all of these things, we are always brought back to the original subject. Always. You get my point? Even if Allah describes to us in detail the laws regarding these issues, but always we're brought back to the original subject, which is Allah, His Rasul, and the hereafter. Always. Now why does Allah do that? To remind us, again, that what is the truly important issue here? Is it law? Remember we said this in the very beginning? If you compare all the ayat of the Quran in sum total, in the subject matter of the Quran, what is the majority of it? Is it law? No. It's all about this, Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so forth and so on. So then law becomes secondary in that respect. Not that it's less important, but secondary, meaning it's not the crux of the matter. The dhurwa, as the Prophet described this, the dhurwa, the best part of it, the synopsis of all of it is Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Right? That's the whole sum total of it. It's the very peak of it. Everything else is just there to reinforce that central theme, that central idea, which is Allah's wahdaniyah and oneness, and your connection with Allah Azza wa Jal as an abd. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Okay, so the beginning of the surah, I want to see first of all how he translated it, because obviously the language of the Quran is a very fasih, it's very eloquent, and it has a lot of very subtle meanings that are implied just by using one or two words. So ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ is an example of that. So let's find out first. Do you have the gracious Quran with you? How did he translate it?
So it says, "This is the book of God, there is no doubt therein. It is guidance for the God-fearing, those who believe in the realms of the unseen, and who duly establish the prayers set by God, and who spend charitably out of what we have provided them."
Okay, so most of you have heard more or less that is the sum total of the meaning of this ayah. This is the book, or as he said, the book of God, which is al-kitab, it's implied, not said. Well, I'm going to just break it down a little bit linguistically so we can understand how the Quran, its beauty and i'jaz, the miracle of the Quran, is expressed in the Arabic language. Dhalika, first of all, he translated it as this, and according to all of the exegetes or the mufassirun of the Quran, dhalika means hadha. Now in Arabic there's a difference. This is from what you call asma al-ishara, demonstrative pronouns. Like this, that, right? You got it? Dhalika means that, which is very specific for something that is far from you. Whereas hadha, which is this, you're referring to something that is directly in front of you. So although the meaning, as he translated, is hadha, which means this, the literal word dhalika means that, as if you're pointing to something that's over there, it's far from you. Why would that be the case? If the meaning is hadha, meaning this, but the literal word is dhalika, which is that, why? So the ulama say this is for the purpose of ta'zeem. Ta'zeem, meaning respect. Or also we can say here, the grandeur. The very high and lofty position that this book has. So even in English we can say, I know it's simple, but this is the best way to understand how rhetoric and balagha works in Arabic. It's just language in general, how people speak. Okay, so you say, if you're eating a plate of food, and you don't just say, this is that right there. It makes sense? It's so good that you're not just saying, this is really, you're saying that right there, right, is whatever, it's fire. Or you see how people use words, right? All these, so it's kind of like that. It would be more powerful to say that as if it's somewhere far beyond, which also points to a point of aqidah. In essence, the origin of the Quran is the word of Allah, correct? So that's far beyond the human realm of things. So instead of just saying this, you say that. Make sense? So ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ. That is, and here again we have, grammatically speaking in Arabic, al-kitab it's mu'arraf, it's a specific noun. Okay? So it also works in ways that when you have this construction in Arabic, it could be one word, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ, or it could be two words. And even that is how far people have gone to explain it. Is it's just one word that's being, one object, if you will. Not word, but object. They're obviously two separate words, but one object that is being referred to. Or is this, as they say, ataful bayan. Ataful bayan, I don't really know how to translate in English grammatically, but it's kind of like when you say, him, Abdullah. You're referring to something, first you use the pronoun, and then maybe the person's still confused about who him is. Who are you talking about? So you say Abdullah. So you're clarifying that I meant by him Abdullah. So ذَلِكَ, what are you pointing to? What are you referring to? Al-Kitab. The book. Literally what? The book. What is the book? Is it just the Quran? Is it all revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal? Is it? So we say whatever was written. In this case, we say most of the time, obviously the reference is in particular this book, meaning the book that is revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This particular form of wahi, the Quran, as revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. La rayba fi. Now the word la here is the same la that you find in la ilaha illallah, which is in Arabic is called la nafil jins. What does that mean? I think, did we go over this before? We did go over this briefly. La nafil jins is when you are basically, you are denying a whole genus, or we can say a whole category of something. So all the individuals that are under that category are also negated. So you may have doubt, but any form of doubt whatsoever is included in la rayba fi. Get the point? So doubt is a general concept, but doubt obviously may have levels. There may be different types of doubt that a person has and for different reasons. When you say la rayba fi, you are basically just saying that all of that is excluded. Whatever doubt a person may have, all of it is excluded. La rayba fihi, then what does that mean? There is no doubt in regards to it. There is no doubt in it. How does he translate it? Therein. Now, how would you understand that?
Within the context of the book. So.
Right. No doubt that it is what? True. Okay. La rayba fi, meaning no doubt whatsoever that it is revelation from Allah. You understand? No doubt whatsoever that it is revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. Wallahu alam. Okay. Now, rayb itself, the word in Arabic, as Imam al-Razi rahimahullah explained in his tafsir, that rayb is similar to shak. In Urdu you use shak also, right? So when you have shak about something, what it means is obviously you're presented with an idea or a concept and you're not really sure, right? You're not sure. So someone gives you some information. California is sinking. I'll just give an example. We were talking about the global change and all that, right? Global warming, excuse me. California is sinking. Now, it's a piece of information. When you hear it, if you have doubt, shak, what does it mean? Well, it could be happening, and also Could not. So there has to be some reason there that you say that it is or is not true as a statement. Whether it's checking the news or whatever it may be that makes you feel better, then this is called shak. Shak is that stage where you're not really sure. Raib, there's a little bit, there's ziyada, there's a little bit more implied in raib, because if you say, for instance, from the root of raib or riba, rabani amru fulan, that so-and-so, I don't know about them. There's negativity implied there. So you're already inclined to think the worst. Right? When you say, I don't know about so-and-so, you're already inclined to think what? The worst. You feel uneasy. You understand? You're not really confident. Right? That's different than shak. Shak, you're not predisposed to one opinion or the other. You just don't know. You understand the difference, right? You're not predisposed. When there's raib, there's a predisposition there that you kind of, I don't really know too much about that right there. Huh? That doesn't make me feel what? Confident or comfortable. So that's why Hassan radiallahu anhu, one of the few hadith that he related, he said that he remembered something the Prophet taught him when he was a child, in the hadith of Imam al-Tirmidhi, and he said, he said to me, "Da' ma la yuribuka ila ma la yuribuk." From the same root word of raib, leave what causes you to doubt, and take that which gives you no doubt whatsoever. And then he said, فَإِنَّ الصِّدْقَ طُؤْمَنِينَ وَالْكَذِبَ رِيبَ. Because truth is tu'manina. Tu'manina, from the Urdu also you say itminan. So in the truth there is what? Comfort. So if you have a student and they give you the right answer, how do you feel? Content. If they give you the wrong answer, how do you feel? The opposite. So the opposite, al-kadhib, lies, are riba. They cause you to feel insecure, unsure. The opposite of being content or being confident is you feel, I don't know. Something about that. You understand? Rabani amru fulan. Like, I don't know too much. Don't feel right about that. Truth, wherever it is and wherever you find it, will always give you tu'manina. It'll cause you to feel secure, calm, itminan. The opposite, lies, will always. So here, what is Allah saying? La rayba fi, meaning it's so clear, so obvious that this is wahi, that only a fool would do what? Would feel riba, would say, I don't know. And of course, obviously, the first khitab, or the first people who are addressed with this, are the Arab themselves. So they're watching the Prophet ﷺ. They see what he does, and they hear these ayat, yatnu alayhim ayatihi. They hear these things. So above all people, and of all people, they should be the first people to understand what? La rayba fi. There's no reason for them to feel, I don't know, at all. Not from the Prophet, in terms of him himself as an individual, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most honest and trustworthy of all of them, and most morally impeccable of all of them, and also not from what he is reciting to you, yatlu alayhim ayatihi, that in every way they are the first people that should understand what? La rayba fi. There's no reason for them to look and say, I don't know. Do you understand? They're the first people that have to say, we give up. We can't, there's nothing that we can do to disparage or to deny the fact that this is a book that comes from ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ وَلَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This is wahi from Allah. There's no other explanation. No problem. So you get the point, right? Right. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this language, because it's talking to them first. And secondarily, obviously, it's talking to the rest of humanity. But without understanding the context and the language, what becomes very difficult is to understand the Quran itself. Am I right or am I wrong? If you understand the context and the language is being used and who the audience is, then obviously these things become clearer to us. That's why Allah said it this way. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Right? So the next part, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, obviously, Hudan is the masdar, is the root word of Hidayah is also a root word of what? Hada yahdi, to be guided. So it's as if it's saying that the sum total of this book is nothing but guidance. But guidance for who? Lil-muttaqeen. So people who are predisposed to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and have some consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Allah misguides many people with it, and He guides many people with it. So their minds already have to be there to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, it will not be a means of guidance. Rather, those people who are not conscious of Allah and everything the Quran says, they're going to do the opposite. Could you call it huda? Is it a guidance for them? Whatever the Quran says, whatever it's saying, we will do the bilkul opposite, right? Like sami'na wa asina, which is coming, right? We hear and we disobey, right? We hear and we will not accept. And that's obviously not who Allah is speaking to in terms of it being a guidance. It is a guidance for people who are conscious of Allah.
So Imam, it's implied that there is a stipulation for the first part, right? So, meaning if you're not in some way receptive or God-fearing, there's no sense in giving someone the Quran and being like, here it is.
Yes, so that's a whole other issue which I have a pet peeve with. There was an organization in Chicago that was their whole drive. They did, fundraising. They have a school and they just send the Quran, right? Send English translations of the Quran as a dawah. Well, there's a lot of reasons why I have an issue with that. The first is that there's no such thing as a Quran in English. It's a translation of the nearest meaning. And the Quran, again, is what I've been trying to talk about, it has to have a context. Without a context, the Quran itself is not always enough. In fact, most of the time it's not enough just to simply give a Quran to someone and say, hey, read this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you hidayah and guide you. It's not the case. There's also a hadith that is very strong that the Prophet ﷺ said, do not, la tusafiru, don't travel to the lands of your enemies with the masahif. Masahif are literally what? The actual book form of the Quran. The direct commandment from the Prophet ﷺ, do not travel to your lands of your enemies with the Quran. Why would he say that? There's many reasons. Number one, first of all, again, whenever people were taught Islam and Deen, when the Sahaba went to different parts of the world, how did they do it? Did they just simply put a book? First of all, the Mus'haf was not like how we see it today, mass-produced, and there were very few copies and very few people that had it. So the book, first of all, was learned by how? The oral tradition. So you would have a physical teacher who you would sit with, like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud who was sent by Umar to Kufa. So he would teach people. In other words, he would sit in the masjid, people would come to him, and he would teach them whatever is necessary for them, which included the Quran, and it also included what?
Hadith.
Not just hadith too. Actually, that's a very interesting thing. See, there's so much that has to be discussed upon. The beginning of the Sunan of Ibn Majah, which is a very famous hadith book. It's considered one of the 6 soundest hadith book, and that's itself to see. Inshallah, I will make a sales pitch after this. But anyhow, not a sales pitch, but we really need to learn a lot. So in the beginning of his book, he has a whole chapter about the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And in the beginning of that too, he has a chapter of the cautiousness of the companions in relating hadith. In that he relates that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Umar, anhuma, and many other Sahaba, these are kibar Sahaba, very well known amongst the Sahaba as being what? Ulama, amongst the Sahaba. That some people said, I traveled with Abdullah ibn Umar for a whole year and I never heard him once in a whole year's time say, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in a whole year. And he's not the only one. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the one I just mentioned, also, it said that he also, same period of like about a months on end, would not say Qala, and when he did, he would say Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and said he would sweat, almost faint, get up, and finally when he said it, he would say, "Oh, kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam." Oh, he said something more or less like that. So we get from the whole historical narrative that the companions weren't just, what I'm saying, they weren't so just brave and just saying, here's a book and just read it. They were more teachers on a very practical level. So they would spend time with people and they would develop them. This is the Meccan period, meaning their iman, belief in Allah, the basic things, their character. And that's why when they were ready, they would give these things to them piecemeal, including the Quran. The Quran was not taught like all at once like we do now. We do all that, right? We teach the Quran, we send these children, mashallah, 7 years old. There's actually a whole chapter of the Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba rahimahullah ta'ala also about that too, that usually in the old days, in those days, they didn't teach children Quran until they were about 10 years old. What they call the age of tamyiz, meaning they're smart enough now to make the distinction between good and bad. They're not mature, they're not adults, they haven't hit puberty yet, but they still know what? Good and bad. So at that point in time, they used to teach their children Quran. So their emphasis was not so much on just a book and words, but more of the substance of it all. And that's why when Aisha anha described the Prophet, what did she say? Kana khuluquhu Quran. His entire character was the Quran. As if you want to know the Quran and you want to understand it, you have to first understand who? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And how do you understand him? Just by reading a book or being around him and witnessing him. That's the process that they had in the old days. Now, that related to what you just said, right? If you look what I mentioned about just the language itself, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, the whole linguistic breakdown, that's addressing first the Arab, obviously, because that's the first audience that you know well, considering that there's no reason for you to have rayb. Right? If shak, as we described, shak is when you're not sure, but you're not predisposed to be, you're not thinking necessarily in the negative, you don't know. So shak means you're ignorant, right? He's talking to the Quraysh first and foremost, the people of the Prophet too, so not just the Arab, but even his own tribe. And he's saying to them, what? Is there any rayb here? Are you predisposed to think that there's a reason for you to say that the Prophet ﷺ, what he's doing, that he's lying? What's the answer to that? La rayba fi. There's no doubt in their hearts whatsoever. Not even doubt, again, they're not even predisposed to think for a second that maybe he's making this up, or maybe he's... They know themselves that there's no explanation for this except that it is ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ. This is wahi from Allah. So then why won't they accept the message? You see now the connection? Because it's هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The real reason why they won't accept is not because of the clarity of it, of the truthfulness of the Prophet ﷺ, or what he's doing, and the ijaz and the miracle of it. That's all very clear to them. لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. What's the real issue then? They as people are not conscious of Allah. So then why do they reject it? It's not because there's any doubt or even predisposed to doubt the Prophet ﷺ. It's because of themselves. And you say, I can't accept this, even if it's true. I can't accept this, even if I cannot doubt it, but I can't what? So they say, سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا. We hear and we disobey. We hear and we refuse. إِلَّا أَبَى. They refuse. I'm not going. So the issue is not the Quran, it's not Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's not the deen. The issue is with them. So it can be a source only for people who have taqwa. Make sense? Alright, so then who are the people of taqwa? That's the next part. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. The first and foremost important thing to understand about taqwa is that they accept, literally, as I said many times, and I will say all the time until people get it, iman is not belief, it is tasdeeq. What does tasdeeq mean? To accept. Believing in something is, right, I can believe that tomorrow I'm going to be a millionaire. How the word's used, right? Or whatever. Okay, that's fine and good, as Allah calls it, tilka amaniyuhum. That's what they like to believe. You got it? Everyone's going to Jannah. That's fine. Everyone wants to think that. But iman, at-tasdeeq, again, when we're talking about shak and all these things, you're given an idea. I gave you a statement. At-tasdeeq, if I say California is sinking right now, what would tasdeeq be? What would iman mean at that point?
I think it's actually happened.
Right. You've accepted my statement as? Fact. That for whatever reason, this person is authoritative. The authority of that person, in this case, if it's khabar, has been established, and what they said, even logically, can California fall in the sea? Yeah. So it's not illogical. So then therefore you look at these two facts, it's plausible, and the person telling me is an authority, so what do? Tasdeeq. That's it. I accept. So the first part of taqwa is what? Tasdeeq. To accept. Yes, Allah is one. And here's the whole subject matter of all of this. So later on in the surah, we get to, it's ayah number 123. وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الرَّحْمَنُ الرَّحِيمُ. So this ayah is revealed. And your ilah, your God, is only one. Right? And that there is no God to be worshipped except for Him who is the most merciful. Of course, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, both are used. I'm not going to, When this ayah was revealed, it is said, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, rahimahullah ta'ala, said that when this ayah was revealed, the Quraysh of Mecca retorted, كَيْفَ يَسْعَ النَّاسَ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. How can human beings accept only one God? Yeah, how do they retort? How can you make people only believe in one God? Everyone's right. You know how sometimes people will argue with it as you have the God, your name is Allah, and they have a God, and I have our own God, and your God is not the same as my God. So everyone wants their own what? Their own God. They want to make their own ilah. So what was the answer to that? It was the next ayah. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ وَالْفُلْكِ الَّتِي تَجْرِي فِي الْبَحْرِ بِمَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسِ until the end of the ayah. So what does Allah say? Allah Ta'ala responded by saying, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the difference of the night and the day, and in the ships that you ride in. And fulk is not just a ship, it's a ship laden with goods. بِمَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسِ, meaning that it has all the things that you need for business and food and everything else. All of that is mentioned by Allah. What is it trying to say? The creation itself is enough for you to think, if you know the nature of creation, that there is only one God. That is your proof, and that is why every human being can accept that there is only one God, because all of creation only has one God, one creator. In other words, because He is خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ فَاعْبُدُوهُ, He is the creator of everything that exists, so therefore worship Him. And that's why Allah mentioned the creation. Because if you look at the nature of creation, you will see that everything other than Allah is dependent on Allah. See what I'm saying? So even last time when I introduced you to some of the terminology of the theologians and mutakallimun, and sorry to get back into the philosophical things again, we'll do it quickly, just to break it down, why they explained it this way. Look at creation, this is what Allah is saying, right? You want the answer? Why is there only one Allah? Why is there only one God? Inna fi ikhtilafi al-layl, right? Inna fi khalqi as-samawati wal-ard wa ikhtilafi al-layli wan-nahar. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمِ يَعْقِلُونَ. This is the end of the ayah. These are proofs enough for people who can think. So, okay, let's use this in a simple way. Just using the same way that our theologians did. That's the cup. Wonderful. We all know what a cup is, right? So this cup has a distinct place from every other object in this room. We all know that as well. Okay, now take the cup. We have, it's round, it's white, it's this high, it's this red, holds this much, all of that. These are secondary attributes or essential attributes. Secondary. Can you take away these things from it? No. You can and you can't, meaning two things. You can take them away, but also it cannot be a cup without them. That's the whole argument that they're making of the jawhar and the aral. That the jawhar is the essence of something, but nothing in creation, the essence of it, can ever be understood unless you understand it alongside with its attributes, which are secondary. So what does all that mean? If you break it all down, can this thing, this cup, exist by itself? Can it? No. So everything in creation, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, everything in creation is like that. So if everything in creation is like that, it means that everything in creation only has one creator. And if it only has one creator, then we only have what? وَإِلَهُكُمْ, your God, meaning all of you, is only one. Got it? That's the whole, again, this is the whole point of what the Quran was trying to say to us, what the Prophet ﷺ was trying to invite us towards, and even with every other thing that's there, with the laws and commandments, the message always comes back to its asl, to its root, and the most important aspect of it, which is وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. You only have one creator, you only have one God, and therefore that's why that one creator, one God should be إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, be worshipped. And that's where you understand commandment. Commandment only can be understood and can be guidance for who? هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. For the people يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ, that they accept that yes, there is only one creator, there is only one God. They are the ones who can accept the hidayah from the Quran. And what is that hidayah? Goes further. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ, and all of these other, in this case, sorry. وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, and so forth until the very end of the first 5 ayat. Does it start to make sense? Or, right? Okay. There you go. Inshallah, also, there's another important aspect of this we'll try and concentrate on maybe next time, which is the issue, of course, in the second juz of Qibla, because this is another important aspect of our communities. As you know, again, this is a Madani surah. It was revealed after Hijrah. Then the Prophet ﷺ and his community came across Ahlul Kitab, became neighbors of the other communities that preceded us. And in the beginning, in order to create a common ground, they prayed towards the same Qibla. But later on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded everyone to face Mecca, which was a big deal. And that also gives us a message, which is that there is a time when we have to establish our own unique identity. There's a time for that. When the Muslims, even while they're living with other people in other communities, they have to be able to establish their own unique identity. And that obviously is going to take a little bit of courage and sacrifice. For the Prophet ﷺ, he always wanted it to be towards Mecca, but because the Prophet ﷺ in his nature was always extremely accommodating, to the point of, even in Sahih Bukhari, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, after Fathu Mecca, after Mecca was conquered, and he stayed there for some time, he told Aisha anha that if your people, meaning the Quraysh, if they had not been so new in accepting Islam, I would have rebuilt the Kaaba and taken off a certain, you understand? This is very important. There's a rule here in this hadith that is kind of established from a fiqh point of view. Why didn't he do it? It would have rocked the boat. You understand? The Quraysh they just accepted Islam at this point in time, and if he had done something like that, they would have just, that's it. You've gone too far. You've changed everything already. We've changed our religion, right? We've accepted you as the Prophet, and when we're doing this, we're doing that. Now you want to change this too? No, you're gone too far for us. You understand? So there is obviously accommodation, but there's also a time when it's not about being rebellious, or it's all about establishing your own identity for the purposes in reality of da'wah. For the purposes of da'wah. Because think about it just on a very logical level. If we go from this platform that we're all the same, so what would be the incentive of a Jew or a Christian or anyone else to become Muslim? Why? Why should I do that? We're all the same, right? Understand? We're all the same. So why should I change? It's very difficult to change, isn't it? Why should I change my religion or become Muslim or even consider it if it's all just the same? So I can stay the way I am, you can stay the way you are, and we're all just the same. No, so the answer can't be that we're all the same. And that's based on all these, again, these are layers, right? That's why I say we should always have, this was the sales pitch, is that we have to learn a lot of things outside too, in addition to our tafsir, because there's many issues here. It's not just the issue of understanding the Quran, it's the issue of understanding the history of these developments of these ideas and civilizations, the modern world, liberalism, and all of these ideas that we live with right now, and even our own deen. So, because in our deen, we are taught that we should be very open about who we are and be very distinct. فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. Turn towards the Qibla that you have now been commanded to, towards Mecca, and distinguish yourselves as a community. At the same time, لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Excuse me, لَا إِكْرَاهَ فِي الدِّينِ. We don't force anyone to accept deen. It is their own choice. Why am I saying that? Because if we, there's just too many problems to cover. If we have only been educated in one particular way, and we don't have any education or background of the deen, then we can use that worldview too in a very problematic way and apply it to our Islam. In other words, if I say that I believe I'm right, then if you come from a exclusively Western secular background, then many times what they assume automatically because of that background in the European history, a very, again, exclusive and particular period of time, they will assume that if you say that, that means obviously that you want to kill people, or that you want to fight them, or that you want to... What does Islam say about that? Has that been what deen teaches? So no, we're distinct. I believe I'm right, and I'm calling you too to accept Islam. But if you don't accept, and you don't want to accept Islam, and you're going to do whatever you want to do, what do you do after that? Nothing. You don't do anything. You still, in fact, as I said before, the idea of dhimmiyun comes from dhimma, which means to protect. So even in the case where there is a Muslim quote-unquote state, and again, I don't like using that word too much, but you have a Muslim land that say is living under Sharia. Even then in that context, these people are not Muslim, what do? What's the answer? Nothing. In fact, you protect them, and you give them their right to practice whatever religion they want, and to live however they want, and there is no reason for you to malign them in any way, to the point of also, that I mentioned that last time, that the fuqaha said you don't even say to them, ya kafir. So what am I trying to say? Just because I'm saying I'm right and you're wrong, does that mean I want to kill you? Can you come to that? Is that even a rational conclusion? No, I'm just saying 2 + 2 = 4. And you're saying it's 5. I'm not going to argue with you about it. If that's what you want to believe, if that's what you want to do with your life, fine. I don't care, right? I'm going to go on with my life. I'll still tell you 2 + 2 = 4, but we can still live together. We can still be neighbors. I'll be amiable. In fact, I will protect you. Ahlul Dhimma is literally what it means. If someone attacked you, I would protect you. If someone tried to steal from you, I would protect you. If someone tried to malign you, I would protect you. You get my point, right? Where for them, in their paradigm, that's unthinkable. Because religion, in their paradigm, was always the means of them, what? Killing each other and fighting each other and causing discord and disunity and, right? Now, it's not that Muslims haven't done that in history either to themselves. Okay? But aslan, the teaching of Islam and the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ is that we do distinguish ourselves, and we're not trying to say that everyone's right. But that doesn't mean that we are saying that we want to do what? Harm those people, or mistreat those people, or do anything to those people outside of treating them as fellow human beings and giving them their rights. We just don't agree with them on a theological level. But that's important. You do have to be distinct. You have to be very clear, because that's the da'wah. You're saying that Muhammad ﷺ is the last messenger. This wahi, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, this wahi is sure. I mean, a sure thing. It's from 2 points of view. This is why I'm going to say we have to study these subjects as well. If anyone is interested, please come to me, because we need to. One is theology. Okay, and the other also, I believe, now is important for many Muslims to learn in the community, is in usul hadith, the basics of hadith sciences. Why am I saying that? From 2 vantage points, from a logical vantage point and also from a textual vantage point, we need to understand the veracity and the truthfulness of our deen, of how this wasn't just something that people just thought of because it sounded fun to them or good to them, but there is an academic effort behind all of this. There was a literal academic, scholarly effort behind all of this that is above and beyond just emotion and I think I'm right, right? We wanted to make sure, even in terms, why did these companions, why were they so scared? Like I mentioned in the whole beginning of the Sunnah of Ibn Majah, a whole year would pass and they wouldn't mention the hadith of the Prophet. Why would they do that? Because they wanted to be very careful of attributing to the Prophet something that he didn't say or he didn't do. So if you read about how hadith was compiled, it could be something as simple as the reason why the scholars didn't accept this hadith. This is exactly what the whole point of this science is what can be attributed to the Prophet and what can't. Is because, for instance, one of the narrators in his old age, and it could be her too, by the way, so it's not, there are female scholars of hadith as well, but let's put it this, that person in their old age began to forget things. Now, if you look at that, does that mean that a person made a mistake necessarily? No. Can a person begin to forget things in their old age and still be correct when they're delivering to you certain information? Obviously, they're just being what? Extra careful. That's all. Extra careful. That when we relate something to the Prophet ﷺ, when we say that the Prophet ﷺ did this or said this, we academically, that's not even to talk about other factors. There's other factors involved too, but just from an academic perspective, we want to even verify whether this can even be soundly transmitted to the point where we are 100% confident that this can be attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. That's the first step, and then there's other steps involved in that. So when a person reads these things or learns these things, they cannot help but appreciate that, mashallah, this deen was delivered to us in the most pristine and profound ways that you will not find, by the way, in any other tradition. If you were to ask other traditions about these issues, right, where did your book come from? Where did Isa alayhi salam say this? Who told you that Isa alayhi salam said this? It's not there. Who told you that Isa alayhi salam said this or did this? So I think that's also necessary for us to endeavor to learn. If anyone is interested, of course, I'm willing, but that's up to anyone else. And these two subjects are very necessary. So from a logical point of view, that is your aqidah and kalam, and then from a textual point of view, which is strictly just dealing with the idea that the book itself or the information itself that came to us is reliable. Those two things I think are a big thing in the community right now that people need to learn, so that they have the confidence in the first part, that I believe in Allah, not believe again, but I accept Allah as He is, that He is wa ilahukum ilahun wahid. He is our one and only God and the God of everything that exists. I am confident with that. I have accepted that. When you start from that point, everything else will start coming into play. But if we start from this other point, which is that, mashallah, we study these things and then we say that, okay, the Sharia and law and commandment, when it's not even applicable, like I said, in our context, there's nothing really you can do about it except on a personal level. And also that we're not even really ready in many ways, because the first part is still very shaky. When you know for sure that this is revelation, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, when you know for sure, you got the point, rayb, again, shak. You don't really know. When you've got rid of that, وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ, and you have yaqeen, which is knowledge. When you know for sure, no, that's it. يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ, you have accepted it based on, again, knowledge, then everything else will come. That's when it is هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Make sense? Any questions? We can do that.
So one point you mentioned, like distributing Quran,
Yeah.
like as a English translation or book, whatever, does not make any difference or should not make any difference. But we have examples like Umar bin Khattab, he embraced Islam, he was
Right.
listening to Surah Taha.
Right.
Then we had like other jinn listening to Quran
Sure.
in some places.
Well, the context again is what? Umar ibn Khattab again knows the Prophet ﷺ. Look at remember we were talking earlier, the modern age and the time of the Prophet, how it was different. There was a fitrah that was still very there, ingrained in people, and they lived together. Mecca even too, according to our standards, would be like a village at that time. So Umar ibn Khattab anhu was almost the same age, is not much younger, younger than the Prophet. What does that mean? He grew up with him. He knows him, he knows his family, he knows everyone around him. So he knows the person, first of all, intimately. He also knows the Arabic language intimately. These are the afsahul Arab, they're the most eloquent. So when he hears the Quran and he saw the Prophet after all these years doing what he's doing, you understand what I'm saying? There's more of a context. There's a real context there. Like, how can I deny this after all this time?
But Hazrat, Umar may be an exception to that, right? Because he by his own admission had such a hatred.
Exactly.
But the
Right.
Prophet made the law, right? For either Hazrat Umar or
Right.
so there may have been more divine.
Of course, there's always is. Behind everything, there's always a, but we're just looking at the outward in terms of like, what is the methodology, right? And the reason why I'm saying that is, again, there's a context to the words that he's hearing. It's not just that he heard these words. He did there too, but even the context is that he's an Arab, first of all, right? So, I mean, it's very, I'm telling you as an English, someone who learned Arabic, and obviously English is my mother tongue, so to speak, but the English translation is not anywhere, like even the very brief things we did, like ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ اسْمُ الْإِشَارَةِ and عَطْفُ الْبَيَانِ, like it's you can't get that just reading an English translation.
So there can be inspiration, but original.
In the original language, you understand. What I mean by that too is the book itself, and I've talked to some non-Muslims about that, this issue, about the Arabic being important to really understanding the miraculous part of the Quran. When you read the English translation, it's very difficult as compared to people who are used to the Bible. Because the Bible is written purposely to be chronological, it has order. The Quran doesn't necessarily have order in terms of subject or events, okay? So the Bible is written chronologically on purpose. And also the language of the Bible is, they translated it many times. Different people had different translations. It's made purposely to be story-like. It's readable for an English-speaking person. Whereas the Quran translations many times for people, it's not really, like as many of them told me, it's very difficult to read, frankly speaking, all right? And that's because, again, the Quran always had a context. One is by actually seeing the Quran in action, which it takes to be around basically us. And that's the bigger problem, is that when they read the Quran, they should understand it in the context of the behavior of Muslims, right? And that's another issue which I was going to bring up too about that is, for instance, to contextualize the Quran. You give a copy of the Quran to a person, let's just say as an example, and they come across some of the more controversial ayat, which they always like to take out of context, right? Right? So wherever you find them, then do what? فَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ مَا وَجَدْتُمُوهُم, right? Kill them wherever you find them. Well, see, it's right here. That's why we can't let them in the country anymore, because the Quran tells them that, and even then they're taught that the Quran, a good Muslim must follow the Quran literally. That too is a false concept. Since the beginning of the revelation of Quran until now, not everything is literal. There is a context, especially to the commandments part. There's a context, okay? So you see how much problems there are when there. Then another ayah, wife beating, right? فَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. The literal ayah says what? Hit them, right? Strike them. So here the guys or the girl or whoever is reading it. Oh. There's another one. See? It says right there, you're supposed to hit him. So if you have the Prophet ﷺ in the picture, then what would you say? You say, okay, well, Aisha anha said what? مَا ضَرَبَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ شَيْئًا قَطٌّ. He never hit anything, not even an animal. Right? So then the context is there. You may, okay, there's more to the picture than what. There must be something more here. You can't just read it literally in another language and then make conclusions that this is what. You get my point now? Mm-hmm. Now, I myself, admittedly, before I took Shahada, I actually read the Quran in English, the whole thing. But maybe there's a difference there because I was already looking for a religion, so to speak. So my mind was already a little bit more open to the idea. I wanted to be guided, right? But not everyone is at that stage. So you just hand them an English Quran, and really all you're doing is just giving, that's why the Prophet said, don't go to your enemies with that masahif, because what? You're just giving them fuel now. Whatever problem they want to find, I remember, I kid you not, this, I'm going to have to say a very controversial word, and in Old English it wasn't controversial. Let's just do this, because I remember this when I first took Shahada, and I was still kind of hanging out with a lot of these people that I was friends with, and I had an English copy of the Quran. I think it was based off of the Pickthall translation. And when you see the words like bukhl in different forms in the Quran, it's translated. It's the original meaning of the word. Please forgive me. This is a no-no. The N-word, niggardly. Before it was a racial slur in Old English, nigger literally means a stingy person, which is why they use it as a racial slur. There's many, because it's kind of like saying you're very low character. Okay, so the translation in my copy literally say niggardly. So watch, look at my friend was curious. He's reading my translation. When I see, I knew it. I knew there was something wrong with Islam. They're racist. Look at this. This is niggardly. I just said, what are you gonna? You understand my point? You're just giving them. The people are already predisposed, right? That rave. They're already thinking negatively in one way. You're just giving them basically more ammunition, because there's no, and that's just a very bad translation. Someone who really doesn't have any idea how the English language is used in a modern context, that word right there is not what it means when you read a dictionary somewhere and said, oh, niggardly means to be, it means to be stingy. So I'm going to use this. Pachara, the guy, right, has never traveled to America, so they don't know that it is not the word to use here. And then someone I know who saw the translation and read it said, oh, see, I knew there was something wrong with this stuff. They're racist. You get my point? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's not like a fatwa, like it's haram or something like that, but it's something to consider. It may not be the best methodology of giving dawah. I think it's always better to introduce them to a more well-rounded explanation or book of Islam, meaning like something that talks about the aqidah and the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then they have a context where they can understand the Quran. Otherwise, just giving them an English copy can be problematic. That's all I'm saying.
Like sometimes especially some news channels, if you watch, they cherry pick these things, and they say that don't make friends with Jews, with Christians, and non-believers. They just quote that part.
Right.
So, and they're coming here to implement Sharia and all that stuff, just to scare people.
The Quran, that's like these preliminary sciences. That's why that's the sales pitch. We need to learn more, even by Arabs. And I kid you not, I saw this on an Arabic news channel recently. There was an Egyptian guy who was trying to prove that relations outside of marriage are okay, like having boyfriend, girlfriend, and being, intimate is all fine. Why? Because the ayah that actually is about polygyny, right? Another, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. The word فَانْكِحُوا in Arabic, nikah, it's funny, that's why, any of you guys have noticed, or the speakers, when you say we're doing nikah, like marriage, you say we're having our nikah tomorrow. If you say it in front of an Arab, you might get a different reaction. Because nikah in Arabic, it literally means the act. So when you say like we're doing nikah tomorrow, it's like, they might look at you and say, yeah, brother or sister, like, whoa. Why are you telling me this? Or, astaghfirullah, like, it's zawaj in Arabic, okay? But that word is used in the Quran. The literal meaning, fankihu, is literally do the act. Whoever you are happy of from amongst women, do the act. And then, of course, 2, 3, 4. So what was the guy trying to prove? He's Arab. That having girlfriends is okay. Where does it say that you only have to be married to have relationships? Look, the Quran itself says, "Fankihu." You understand my point? He's using the Quran. The Quran says, have these relationships. Now, of course, mashallah, the Shaykh explained to him, there's a little bit more than just picking up a book, right, and just saying, hey, there it is. Mashallah, it's in Quran. Why are you guys being so hard on this? It's right here. So you have to have a background, preliminary knowledge of certain things, including language, because that Arabic is not your normal Arabic. It is fasih, it is very you know, these things, like small things we said, demonstrative pronouns, ism al-ishara, they all have different implications, okay? And then on top of that, you have to understand the Prophet ﷺ and what is meant. So even the word nikah in Quran, is it meant in its literal way, or is it meant kinaya as something else, as a metaphor for, what is it a metaphor for? Marriage.
Contract.
Right, a contract, in other words, a legal binding contract that two people are together and the community knows. It's not the literal meaning, right? So all of that is necessary. You have to have a context to understand a text. Without the context, the text can always be taken out of context. Sorry to mix it all up, but you get my, always, even for an Arab, you can take it way out of context and say, oh, see, look, I actually watched that with my own eyes. It was actually pretty funny in the beginning just to see how far this person was taking it, like, mashallah. Okay, there you go. Any other questions? We'll wrap up. No? So, you know, if someone is interested, let me know. Sure. Jazakallahu khairan kathira. Jazakumullahu khairan kathira. Thank you all for coming and spending your time.